I want to share some stories with you all today, and by the end of this, I want you to figure out who the main character could be. You don't have to tell anyone, just try to figure out who it could be. Now, I'm not here today because I came up with a brilliant innovation or because I had an amazing app, but simply because I've had a revelation, a rather naive yet powerful one. So growing up, I used to take piano lessons, and I remember this one particular lesson where I was talking to my piano teacher about my school. And this other student, she happened to overhear us, so she quickly asked me whether I knew a certain teacher that taught at that school, my school. I'd spoken to that girl earlier, and she seemed sweet enough, so I very enthusiastically put all my trust in her, and I told her, "That teacher? Yeah, I know her. I hate her." To that she said, "Oh yeah? I'm her daughter." So I'd heard of the phrase, "think before you speak," a couple times earlier. We all have. But that's when it actually sunk in. Fast forward to my dad predicting that most things in life I'll learn solely from experience and not from my parents. And these kinds of experiences are not to be confused with the big things, like, say, getting into an accident or getting your heart broken. But the smaller, more gradual things, something I like to call micro experiences. I'll explain that soon, but what I mean to say is there are different kinds of learners. A few who learn by faith in their teachers, a few who learn by instruction, and then there are fools like me who learn from experience. Hold that thought for a second and imagine if I'd done the same thing I did in my piano class with my future boss. Yeah, so there's an obvious risk factor that comes along with this method of learning. And again, we'll get to that in a second, but first let's get to something that all of you know. Something that all of you want to really badly forget and bury deep inside your heart. An old ally turned enemy, the bane of your social existence, and if you have old friends out there, you definitely want them to hit their heads and forget that part of your life. Phases. Now, I'm sure we would have all related to this at some point in our lives, and if you're having trouble admitting to it, I'll give you a few examples of my own. I've had quite the collection, in fact. I remember this one time when I was obsessed with ninjas. So I bought this book, I tried to learn Japanese, I experimented with cosplay by making masks and costumes, all by myself at home. And now I realize how stupid I must have looked addressing myself as a shinobi warrior. But that's not all though. I went through this fashion phase, don't we all, where I tried so hard, I matched different colors, I tried on layers, explored wardrobes, to finally, eventually, come out looking like a complete clown. I've gotten better though. And yes, of course, I feel so cringed out by how I used to think I was so cool. But I was lucky enough to realize what all this taught me beyond just superficial things. As a ninja warrior, I learned the extent of human perseverance and just how much someone can stretch their limits. As someone who's still learning about fashion, I now know exactly what Priyanka Chopra meant when she said, the only thing you need to wear well is your confidence. It's true, more than the outfit you're wearing, the way you carry it decides if you're looking good that day or not. More than the half-baked script you might be reading out loud, the way you deliver it decides if you're going to publicly embarrass yourselves that day or not. And these are all lessons I would have otherwise completely disregarded had I not been able to reflect on this deeply enough. Even though most of us can resonate with going through such phases, we tend to trivialize these things to the point where we forget that there are lessons we could derive from them. These are the kinds of experiences I'm talking about. The ones on a microscopic level that matter just as much, maybe even more. Micro experiences. What sets one apart is how well they're able to reflect on the small things too, on not just what they did wrong, but also what they did right, and how they learn from it. Knowledge is not equivalent to application. That's the whole theme for today. Now, during rehearsals for this event, I had this little moment where I looked around and I saw all of my friends ideating, creating, practicing, doing wonderful things. And I felt so good to be there with these incredible people and have this terrific opportunity. And when I saw no adult around to help manage things, supervise things, I somehow felt the full weight of the phrase, "we are the future," on my shoulders. And as a young person who's just blooming into this new ideal for the future, I need to be ready for anything. Because when life does a complete 180, I can do nothing but conquer it. And the best help you can employ in such situations is self-help. But in order to help yourself, you must first know yourself. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. That's a quote by Benjamin Franklin, and what better involvement than the experience itself? But there's a catch. There's always a catch. There's a reason why this method of learning is referred to as learning the hard way. As a child, you are easily forgiven for the mistakes that you make, but as an adult, you may be acquiring knowledge and wisdom to last generations, but you no longer have the security that 5-year-old you had while making mistakes. And that's why it's so important to learn from the small things too. Because when we do that, we're able to upscale the lesson to bigger things, like say piano class to future boss. But I'll be very frank with you. If you're learning from experience, it means you're a first-timer in everything. And in that case, there really is no way to have a zero-risk situation going on. In that case, it's necessary to devise your own method of tracking the terrain safely and getting the most out of it, like I did. Let me give you some context. Initially, after coming up with my message for you guys, and after applying to be a speaker, I realized that I had exams in the middle, so I might not have enough time to write the script. But then I thought, you know what, script writing can be done in what, half a day? As long as I have a message to give, right? Wrong. Because when I wrote this script, the first draft, it turned out to be the worst thing I had ever written. I'm pretty sure the story I wrote about aliens in 4th grade was better. I realized I'd let myself celebrate too early with this, and that celebration was inducing into me this false sense of confidence. In this confidence, it was throwing my estimation of this entire situation way off track. I'd gone wrong the same way before. So if there's one thing I've learned this month, it's not to do that. Now, whenever I catch myself getting too ahead of things and celebrating when I've only just achieved a small part of the goal, I say not now. Hold it back. Save it. And that's just one instance. I can't tell you how much I've learned about handling myself in adverse situations, and that's because I've consciously paid attention to learning from the smaller things, to reflecting on myself. I'm well on my way to building my algorithm to keep the risk at bay. My fail-safe to successful experiential learning. And you may ask me what that is. Well, it's self-reflection. Becoming more self-aware brings me closer to myself. And trust me, being able to know exactly what you're doing and exactly why you're doing it is a lot more powerful than it may seem. And for all the Gen Z people over here, if you didn't realize it, this is the core of your glowing up experience. Knowing yourself just as much as owning yourself. Think of it this way. When you're flung into such situations, the outcome now depends on how well you manage to employ everything you've learned before to successfully, effectively learn even more now. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. The ultimate goal should always be to learn more. And because for people like us who can never really avoid taking a free fall for our mistakes, it's important to be able to cushion that fall. For us, the path from knowing to doing gets a lot more practical than a few others. Now let's bring you back to the beginning, to when I asked you to figure out who the main character is. And you must be confused because I've been referring to the main character as myself, right? But here's the deal. It's subjective. For you, it's not me. It's you in the stories. You're the main character. I never wanted you to learn from experiences, from my experiences. I want you to go out there and live it yourself. And with a fail-safe, that should definitely be possible. The plot twist here is that my fail-safe, it's tailored to my personality, and it's obviously going to be much different from yours. The only common factor we have is self-awareness. So maybe if you change the way you reflect to accommodate all the seemingly trivial aspects that you might be missing, you could get on the path to building a fail-safe much earlier in life. Worst case scenario, you carpe diem your way through life, end up in a hot mess, come a full circle, and give a TED talk about do not go out there and experience it all by yourself in 2024. But take it from me, that won't happen. And now I'll leave you all with that thought and something I've always wanted to say unironically. Thank you for coming to my TED talk.